Good evening. Happy Friday, the 20th of September. I don't know why I said that because what is today other than a Friday night? Welcome to another exciting Incredichat. And we're going to get things started right now. Oh, we just had some, I don't know what's going on Instagram, but whatever. But we're live on Facebook and YouTube right now. So we're here and let's welcome in our guest tonight. We've had him on here. We'll talk about the last time he was here, which was, gosh, 4 years ago. Let's welcome in. And that's why I need you in here to help me. Russ, help me pronounce your name again.
Kazmierczak.
Kazmierczak. Russ
Yes.
Kazmierczak. I did good, right?
You
Kazmierczak.
did.
Welcome back to Incredichat. I was just saying, so I was just looking to see when we last did this. It was in 2020.
I don't believe it.
Maybe we did something about Final Faction too. I forget. Did we do a Final Faction thing, or did we talk
We
about
did.
that? So
That's right.
But again, that was probably a few years ago. And what happened to that toy line? We'll get to that later on. But anyways, Russ, welcome to Incredichat. Welcome back to Incredichat. And as some people saw that I posted a couple of weeks ago. First of all, I met you years ago at Ace Comic Con, and God, that was probably probably like 9 years ago at least, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
And I met you and a bunch of other. I mean, there's just a great creative group of comic book creators and fans down in Arizona, and I met you there, and I hadn't seen you in like 9 years. I mean, we communicated over the internet, and then I'm walking through Terrificon in Mohegan Sun, and I'm like, what? And there you are.
So, I was like a beacon from the Southwest.
I didn't know you were coming out here, but again, that's the beautiful thing about this fandom and all this stuff is that you make friends across the world, and you never know where you're going to run into somebody at one of these many conventions, because there are so many conventions every weekend. People travel, and you see people all the time, which is fantastic. But yeah, so let's go back to you and talk about amazing Arizona comics for anybody who's just joining us now and watching, and they didn't maybe catch the thing from 2020. Some new fans, but you do amazing Arizona comics, and you've been doing this, God, for how many years now?
Since 2010, issue 1 came out, so that puts me where 14 years or so with that comic. Yeah. And you're holding issue 51. I'm finishing issue 52, kind of as we speak. So the series has come out fairly consistently quarterly. There was a year or two where I shot for monthly and kind of achieved that. But yeah, I'm finishing issue 52 right now, which was my recent 24-hour comic challenge. And although Arizona's in the title of the comic, it is independent superhero stuff, so really anybody could read it. A lot of the stories are inspired by real news events or different aspects of Southwestern culture. And I've created this roster of original superheroes that I'm really proud of, and that have obviously carried me for at least 52 issues. So I'm now gunning for 100.
Yeah, you keep coming back. So why the heck not, right? That's awesome. I mean, so you said you've been doing it since 2010, and I mean, I definitely want to talk about the 24-hour challenge, because I think that's just awesome that you do that. But what was really the inspiration? What made you, say I'm going to do these characters back in 2010? Where'd you get the idea?
Sure. Well, I was born in Connecticut, actually, in Bridgeport, but my family moved to Arizona when I was 8. I moved to California for college and career, and when I moved back to Phoenix, I wanted to continue self-publishing, as I had been in California with a buddy of mine. I would write scripts, he would draw them. We exhibited at San Diego Comic-Con and APE and all the shows out there. So again, when I moved back here to Phoenix, I wanted to continue doing that. I had to draw the stories myself, and so kind of ease into that role of storytelling. And when I was thinking about what kind of comic I wanted to make, I knew I wanted to make a superhero comic because that's where my heart is. But I wanted it to have a unique angle. And I realized that Arizona really didn't have any notable superheroes. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, what's going on here in Phoenix? We're like the 5th or 6th largest city in the country, depending on the census that year. So I was watching the news one night, and Sheriff Arpaio, no longer Sheriff Arpaio, but retired Maricopa County Sheriff Arpaio, was on the news talking about, on CNN actually, talking about the immigration issue and Arizona's role kind of in that nationwide debate. And it just suddenly struck me that if Commissioner Gordon were real, he would kind of be a talking head on these network news shows, right? They bring in experts from around the country all the time. And usually the topics are nationwide, but these are regional perspectives. So I thought Commissioner Gordon would surely be on the news from time to time talking about crime in Gotham and what it's like working with a vigilante and stuff like that. So again, looking at Sheriff Arpaio, I thought if superheroes existed in Arizona, surely he would recruit them and try to use them to his own controversial means and ends. So I just kind of created this roster of superheroes as a result of that thought. The kind that were young and potentially easily manipulated by him at that time, but then eventually came into their own and formed their own team, kind of a local Justice League or something, and a JLA, Justice League Arizona. But and then the character ideas just kind of kept coming from there, and yeah, I have dozens probably.
I was going to say you've built this incredible world of characters. And I mean, so you were selling copies of this, and again, you've been doing this for what now, about 14 years, right? So and I mean, you were here in Connecticut with Dean, selling some comic books to the folks at Terrificon in Connecticut, back to your home state. But I mean, at this point, 14 years into it, how far has the reach of Amazing Arizona Comics gone? Like, have you gone overseas with it? Do you have fans over there at this point?
I think I do. In fact, it was at that Ace show where a young woman bought a couple issues and brought them back to Japan with her, where she was from. Wow. I think she went to that show to see, who were some of the guests at that show? Maybe Chris Evans.
Chris Evans was there. I know. I think Tom Holland was there, and a couple of the other people because at that point it was just Spider-Man: Homecoming.
That's right. There. So she had flown from Japan to see those stars, picked up a couple of my issues, took them back with her to Japan, sent me a couple of pictures of her holding them in Japan, her home. So I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. But I have subscribers that sign up every year to get the issues via mail from around the country. So they go as far east as New York, Brooklyn, where Dean is. I have some friends and fans in Florida, New Orleans, California, Texas. I'm just trying to think of all the addresses I write when I send these out. So it's certainly beyond Arizona's, state borders. And it's really exciting to think about, because as much as I like these stories to be local, it's the mentality that when we were kids reading Marvel comics, Stan, Jack, all those guys, they referenced New York all the time, Bleecker Street. And I know where Forest Hills is, because that's where Aunt May lives and stuff like that. And he didn't feel any hesitation or reservation about using actual New York locations in comics. But I just feel the same way about Arizona. I feel like even though the stories take place here, and I reference locales and different aspects of culture in Arizona, as long as the characters are telling a story that anybody can relate to, that stuff is transcendent. So, the reach is far as Japan.
That's and that's the beautiful thing, is that we live in this world now, right, where you never know where this can go. So like you said, it's in Japan, right?
Sure.
I mean, who knows who's going to see it over there and be like, oh, let's do something with this, which I think.
Hey, fingers crossed, man. Somebody wants an Amazing Arizona Comics manga.
Yeah,
I could print them backwards, so you read them from right to left, no problem.
There you go. I mean, and listen, like, hey, you know what? We want to give you a few $1 million to license out your characters. I mean, hey, why not, right? So anybody,
I'm ready.
But I mean, that's the beautiful, again, the beautiful thing about this hobby and this thing. And I mean, you absolutely are, and this is going to lead into that. You're a local celebrity out there in Arizona because you do you.
Well,
Well, I mean, you just did the 24-hour challenge, and I know you're sharing and posting. You had media coverage of this. Like people actually, you know, came out and watched you doing this, and the news was there. So tell us a little bit about the 24-hour coverage, and I mean, how did that get started? And you know, I mean, people obviously must recognize you. Oh, you're that guy who spends us all night drawing comics in a window.
it is really exciting when I go into a coffee shop. A couple months ago, I was in a coffee shop and somebody pulled me aside and say, "Hey, are you the Speed Cameron guy?" It's one of my characters, Speed Cameron. And I felt like this must be how Stan Lee or Bob Kane felt like when they, kind of touted that they were the creators of these characters everybody knows so well. So that was really cool. But the 24-hour comic challenge started back in 2015 for me. So this year was my 9th annual. We skipped 2020, of course. But at that time, I was really into ways to get my comic out beyond the sphere of comic shops and Comic-Con and into like a mainstream arena where people that might not read comics or even think they're still being published might discover my comics and me. So I thought about doing the 24-hour challenge, not just in my studio at home, but in a public place where it was kind of this exhibition, kind of this performance art piece. So at that time, in that year, that first year, a local furniture shop in our Melrose district down here, which is kind of an artsy part of town, the owner of that furniture shop agreed to let me sit in her window and draw this comic. And so the mentality was like people walking home from the bar or something might look over and see me sitting in a window drawing and be like, "What's going on over there?" And then kind of be drawn to that, like, like the man in the glass, like a man in a glass box or something. So it was kind of like a David Blaine meets Jack Kirby kind of thing. Since that year, I've done it every year at Drawn to Comics in downtown Glendale, because they have a big, beautiful storefront window where it's almost like a little room, like a real glass box.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to stop you there too. So if anybody's what's Glendale, Arizona?
Yeah.
So if anybody's in because I went there. You guys all took the few of us who came out there from the show, and Jan Wolf, he from this area. He was out there, so and that's how we all hooked up and stuff. But we went to Drawn to Comics, and I mean, I forgot the owner's name, but Ken. I mean, what an incredible store, and totally an incredible store. And I mean, if I ever get back out there, I want to go back there. I mean, then it's the kind of store that you want your comic shop to be. It really, like when I walked in there, it was like really just a sense of a community hub for the fans, and they had like that alcove and stuff, whatever. It's just a fantastic store. So I mean, I love that place. I always think about that comic store. That's the place. That's my ideal kind of comic shop.
Absolutely.
There.
We're lucky in Phoenix to have several great comic book stores. And Ken and Sue opened their store in 2005. It's a family-run business still. And they've just expanded in downtown Glendale. They started in a little storefront, and then they moved up the street to a slightly bigger space. And now they're in this big, beautiful corner, like I say, kind of the storefront with the old showcase glass windows that you might imagine, mannequins wearing fancy clothes, kind of a thing. And for one night a year, I'm that mannequin wearing my fancy clothes, making comics. And it's pretty cool to be a part of their community and kind of their culture. We do it. It's a tradition now when we do this.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what the secret is to my supposed celebrity is I just issue a press release, man. I just put it out into the world that, hey, this is a different thing, a cartoonist making a comic in real time, 24 hours in a window. I do add an element of kind of community outreach with it too, where because I'm making a comic for 24 hours, I think of it kind of like a marathon. Yeah. And people can sponsor hours as you might a runner in a marathon. And I donate part of those proceeds to a local nonprofit, Kids Need to Read, which gets books and literacy programs to kids that really need those things most. So that element is involved too, and that's kind of appealing to the media. It's not just some dude doing this thing, but he's added a layer of meaning to it so they can kind of promote that too. And yeah, it's just become a really fulfilling part of my year. It's almost the culmination of a year's efforts every year, where I build up to that, make this comic, put it out, and then kind of the year descends from there, where I'm still making comics and stuff, but it doesn't get any better than that kind of pressure, that kind of boiler room, this has to get done now kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, when you're going into that, I mean, obviously, you already have like some ideas and a story mapped out before. You're not just going into a blind, right? Or
Well, you're not supposed to. The 24-hour comic challenge originated with Scott McCloud, the author of Understanding Comics,
okay,
and he challenged one of his deadline challenged friends. He dared him, let's just sit down and we're going to make a comic in a day. We're going to get it done. And the idea was that the comic in concept and production was completed within that 24 hours. So you're kind of supposed to go in with a blank slate, but if you're a storyteller, it's kind of hard not to mine ideas you might have in the back of your head. Like this year, I went in with something that my boss at work mentioned, and I just couldn't get it out of my head. So that ended up being the first act of the story. But that's okay. Nobody's enforcing these. It's not like the comic book police are going to show up and say, "Hey, that's
right.
too well developed an idea." But yeah, I went in with that and then just kind of went from there, and ended up by the 24th hour having 24 pages under my belt.
And I mean, what pressure that is, like really put out like essentially an hour, a book an hour, which I'm not book an hour, page an hour, I should say. So that's good. Now what about like obviously probably a lot of coffee, and what about those bathroom breaks? You got to do that, right?
Oh,
Or you
absolutely. Yeah.
don't have a catheter hooked up or anything, right?
That's not a bad idea, actually. That could save me 45 minutes, maybe. No, it's again, there are no comic book police enforcing the rules. So I eat, I use the restroom. People come and visit throughout the 24 hours. So I leave the window, go outside, say hi, stuff like that. And in fact, this year I took a little liberty, and because there was such a celebratory air around this year, my girlfriend organized this awesome kind of parade of support that marched by the window around 8:30 that night. And so that was probably about 45 minutes to an hour of just hanging out with all these folks that came to say hi. So I gave myself about 45 minutes after the challenge to go back and touch up some pages, just to feel a little bit better about them. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's taking what would usually take 2 months, maybe, worth of work, and condensing it into a very intense 24 hours. And I encourage any artist, no matter what their medium, to try something like that. There's the novel writing challenge in November. What's that called? It's a challenge where you're supposed to write a novel throughout the month of November.
Oh wow, I didn't know that one.
I think it's called No Mo Po or something like that. The November novel, I don't know, writing challenge. Oh no, there's an abbreviation for it, like a hashtag for it. So yeah, again, whatever your chosen medium is, to do something, to create a project in such a tight period of time really helps enforce your priorities as a storyteller or artist, your methods, your techniques, the tools that you use. I mean, I've learned so much over these last 9 years doing that, about the way I make comics and the way to make comics in general, that I use throughout the year as a result of that.
Yeah. And you mentioned the tools too. I mean, and that's you're all, you're pretty much for the most part in these sketches, are you doing them digitally, or you're doing it in regular hand and paper? What's your preferred method nowadays? I mean, obviously in 2010 you weren't doing the digital stuff. That was all more, was a
Well,
little bit
I'm old school. I'm still making comics today, very much in the same way I made them in 2010, which is pencils and inks on paper, which are then scanned and then colored and lettered digitally. So it's kind of a combination of the two. I'd really like to get into digital drawing, and I know that's kind of the wave of the future, but there's something so intimate and tactile about drawing on paper that I don't think I'll ever be able to let go. In the same way that, print comics are still kind of the triumph of the industry over the digital copy, the digital file. I just can't get off paper, I guess.
Yeah, well, talking about that, and that's like kind of a nice segue too, because outside of being a creator, you're also a fan, right? And
Huge. Yeah.
we can see that behind you.
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point, and I mean, this goes for comic books, this goes for animation, right? So you take like any of these things, Jack Kirby, or Joe Sinnott, who lived near where I am, so their artwork is like legendary,
Oh, yeah.
and they worked pencil on paper, period, right? So go with me on this one, and same thing with animation. All your old Disney stuff, your Warner Brothers, your Looney Tunes, whatever, those were done on animation cells or pencil tests. All that artwork is now floating in space. Like all the artwork that's being done now is just like floating in space. So yeah, are there great artists now? But nobody's going to ever be able to, if Jack Kirby was around now, there would be no, wow, I have an original piece of Kirby art, because
Wow.
art doesn't really exist, because if you're doing it digitally, you're it's
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's becoming a lost art form.
Well, and the original art market right now is absolutely booming. I was at San Diego Comic-Con this year, and I saw many dealers of original pages with works that blew my mind to get to see this stuff, like the original page. One that really struck me was the cover, and this is kind of obscure, but if you're a kid of the '90s, you'll know it. Mike Zeck's cover for the third Robin miniseries, Robin 3, Cry of the Huntress. That's an issue I bought at a very specific time in my youth, and I remember exactly where I was when I bought it, when I read it, the circumstances that were going on in my life at that time. I read that issue over and over again, folded it, put it in my back pocket. So that's a special issue for me, as obscure as it is. And the cover, Mike Zeck, it's the KG Beast, which dates it too a little bit, but he's holding Robin, Tim Drake Robin, like by his collar, like holding him aloft like this really powerful image of man versus vigilante child, I guess. And so I walked into San Diego Comic-Con, and that original artwork was one of the first things I saw in a glass case. And I just thought, how amazing would it be to own something like this? And then I realized, how amazing would it be to have the tens of thousands of dollars I'd need.
How amazing was that? How amazing the price was.
I saw a Norm Brayfogle Detective Comics cover. Again, that really struck me. The second appearance of Anarchy, I think it's issue 409 or 410. $44,000 for that original art piece. And that's pretty indicative of a lot of the stuff I saw. Now, of course, Brayfogle is no longer with us, so that's a very finite catalog, his work. But that really didn't even matter. Like, I saw a lot of contemporary work, people that are still, penciling and inking on Bristol, and that we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. And if you look at Rob Liefeld's Instagram today or yesterday, he posted an old original art catalog of his that he found from the 90s. And we're talking about pages from X-Force #2, Deadpool's second appearance and stuff like that. And he was selling them then for what was probably a lofty $1,000 a piece, a couple $100 a piece. So you see the inflation in these prices because of what you're talking about. These artworks will eventually no longer exist because everybody will be working digital. So to have that thing in hand that made the comic you love, it just won't exist anymore in this way.
Yeah, because and again, like you said, like that moment, that moment in time and what was going on with you. So that if you had those thousands of dollars to buy that Robin cover, I'm sure that would have gone home with you. But
absolutely,
it had meant something to you. And again, it goes for comic books, it goes for animation. All these things, people have a memory of what these are. And it's one thing you can buy like a print, of that cover or a picture of like Scooby-Doo or something, but it's
Sure.
different than having an actual piece of the original art. Like you're watching something or you're reading something and you're like, I have that. I own
Yeah.
I can go and I have this in a frame or in a portfolio or whatever,
Yeah.
and that's the one thing about like the comic and the animation industry that's kind of sad is like the, the art doesn't really live. I mean, it lives in the print and on the screen, but it's not there,
Right. And
right?
if you're into it like we are, I do have a Norm Brayfogle page, but it's an Archie page. And it was affordable. I think I bought it for $75.
There you
And considering that's an artist that's no longer with us,
go.
and I can look at that page and see a little bit of the blue line. There's some white out. I can
Yeah,
see the stroke of the Sharpie and the heavy blacks and stuff like that, or his brush, whatever he used. It's really organic to see the page live like that before
yeah,
it's published. And it's as close as we'll ever get now to watching him draw, looking over his shoulder at that drawing board.
yeah,
So yeah, I love it. I didn't really prioritize that kind of original art scene until recently. Getting a page like that really put that aspect of our fandom on the map, and realizing that uh, you could still get some pages affordably depending on what you like. Like I own 3 original pages, 2 of them are Archie's. So
mhm,
it goes to show that if you're into Archie in any way, or if an artist you like just happened to draw an issue or 2 of Archie in those years where they were kind of expanding that house style and letting
yeah,
guys like Brayfogle in, you could get some original works by these guys that might, like a Brayfogle Batman page would be thousands of dollars, but an Archie page is maybe only a couple hundred now. So it makes it within reach for
yeah.
fans that, like most of us, are on a budget.
Absolutely, and you have something from that artist again. So
Yeah.
something that they physically touch. That tangibility of it. I think just that. I think outside of that too. I think just across the board, like you look behind me here. I got my part of my DVD collection. And I think that's just an important thing too. Like the world of streaming, everything in the world is digital now, and in our world here, we're losing that tangibility. You've got all the action figures behind you, kids. I mean, who are the
Oh, yeah.
who are the action figures for now? Are they for us and for the kids? Right? They're for our generation, right? Because I mean, and listen, some kids are the exception. Like my son loves the toys, but I mean, the market really is guys our age who are out there, yard sales, flea markets, and even the cons, looking for that. Oh wow, look what I found for $1. Now I'm gonna flip it for $4,500. Like that.
Right.
I know you have Ninja Turtles. What's that? The cat from Ninja Turtles. That's like the hot figure. I forget his name.
Oh, yeah. Of course, I don't have him, but yeah, the cat burglar character,
Yeah.
Scratchy, something like that.
Right. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
people go and look for like, and that's the thing. But again, that tangible thing, like as a kid, watching television and being able to say like, wow, I've got this figure of this cool character. Like, wow, look, I found this. I found this. Wow, like last week. Wow, I've got Monkey Man from Indiana Jones. Like,
Oh, cool.
I'm watching Indiana Jones. I'm like, I need to hold Monkey Man.
Well, when I was a kid, action figures were like storytelling tools. Like I really taught myself how to write playing with action figures, because I didn't just mash them together. I did like these epic battles where there were subplots and asides, and like my mom
Yeah,
would make fun of me for like, are you talking to your toys again? I'm like, no, they're talking to each other. Like I would articulate the dialogue out loud. I would, kind of imagine what the camera would be like in different angles
yeah,
in my play sets and stuff. So drawing comics today is just like doing that back then, playing with action figures back then. Um, so yeah, as an adult, of course, I only keep them on the shelf. I don't play with them or anything like that.
well, but again, but like you said, there's that creative aspect. I mean, and I have a large Star Wars collection. I don't know if you can see here. I have all my my Muppet figures from Palisades there. I'll
Oh,
just
cool.
Well, I'll throw here. I forget the name of the company, but they just did some Fraggle Rock characters, you know.
Oh,
But
wow.
the only one I picked up was Traveling Uncle Matt, but he fits beautifully like right in there with Kermit and the gang.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's cool.
That's part of it is like you set up, not necessarily playing with your toys, right? But you set up these cool scenes. It's like cool. How did Matt Fraggle ever make it to the Muppet Show? No, but he does now, and that's the creativity. And I think for our generation, like you said, we had those experiences, whether it be Ninja Turtles, GI Joe, He-Man, Star Wars, what have you. Kids today don't have that.
No.
It's all video games. And what's worse is they like to watch other kids play video games, which I don't understand.
I don't get it. Yeah, that I'll never understand that phenomenon. I'll never get it.
It'd be like, Russ, okay, get your Ninja Turtle. I'm gonna watch you play Ninja Turtles. I'm gonna watch you play Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, right.
Crazy. But yeah, I think there's just such a lack in that creativity. And I work with kids. I have 2 kids, and like I always want them to. I talk to the kids at school. I mean, they're a little bit older, but they're not playing with toys. But like my son, he sets up scenes, and I guess to your point, like you were setting up these elaborate scenes. Like my son, I'll speak for him, is very intricate about the detail. Like he has the Marvel Legends, so he'll look at the cover of like an A-Force comic and then recreate that with the figures, and I mean that's not
Oh,
a lot
that's
of,
really cool.
yeah, and again, not a lot of kids do that, and I also think kids suffer from finding some action figures because we're in the stores buying them all up too for our collections.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, I may have reached in front of a kid's. I may have seen a kid looking at a toy in wonder, and then just obstructed his view with my hand once or twice as I take that last one off the peg. Like, you'll go to other stores, kid, but I'm only hitting this Walmart today, and I'm buying this right now.
This character's really cool, but here's an R2D2.
Yeah, right. There's a whole selection here. I just want that one. Yeah.
Well, like I'm like just joking with the Star Wars stuff. Like they always talk about like the peg warmers.
Right.
So like Hasbro kept putting out. They had like General Lando, Bespin Lando, and then they had the Skiff Garden Lando, and they just were peg warmers. This
Yeah.
is like
Yep.
cool. Who wants get a Lando?
Yeah. Yeah. Here in the Phoenix market, I'm a big fan of the Masters of the Universe Origins figures that have been coming out since 2020. And Jitsu was a peg warmer here for
Really?
the better part of a year and a half, I'd say. And he's probably still out there at some targets, but man, it was a drought for a while, and it was just Jitsu for a long time. So,
well, let's segue into figures, right? Because you have a collection behind you. You said DC and Ninja Turtles. What else do you collect?
well, what's interesting right now, this is kind of out of left field, but one of my big collections now is food mascots. So we'll get back to action figures, but things that I'm actively collecting now are like memorabilia that represents food mascots that we might remember from our childhood. So all the cereal characters like Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Jolly Green Giant, the Pillsbury Doughboy, Mr. Peanut. When I'm at a thrift store or if I'm antiquing and I see something like that, I'm drawn to it pretty immediately. Because I'll be honest, when it comes to vintage action figures, I'm set with Masters of the Universe. I still have most of my figures and vehicles and play sets from when I was a kid, and I've filled the gaps in on what might have gone lost or missing or broken. Superpowers, I'm into McFarlane Toys re-releases, but not the... Say what?
Do you have original Superpowers from when you were a kid too?
I have a handful of them, not all of them. And I'm interested in collecting them all. No pun intended there, but as they say, collect them all. I'm not getting into I've decided not to go into his legion of Superman and Batman variants that are coming out with the superpowers, because I think I counted on the back of the latest wave that, let's just say hypothetically, there were 50 superpowers figures that McFarlane Toys has put out. Easily 25 of those figures would be a Superman or a Batman.
But that's with any toy line. That's the thing. It's like,
true.
because
You need a
those are
household name to anchor the wave, right?
those are the ones that they call what, evergreen, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah. So
evergreen.
as a pseudo completist, I was initially thinking that I was going to buy all of these figures, but then I thought, you know what? If I refrain from buying the Superman and Batman re-releases, and I just save that $10 a piece to maybe invest in a classic superpowers figure that I never had, like the Orion figure that's a little more collectible. Plastic Man, I know, is $100 plus out there on the collector's market. So if
Yeah.
I just again not buy these Legion of Superman and Batman, that's the money I'll have in my pocket for something like that. And I'll buy the more unique characters that he's putting out. Like I just picked up the latest wave, Booster Gold, Metamorpho. I think Black Manta re-release was in that, and I missed him the first time around, so I snagged it.
And
So
he
to
was a
get the character,
surprisingly hard character to find too, for whatever reason. Black Manta.
yeah, yeah,
Everybody
and I
was.
had him in my hand at a GameStop and thought, I'll wait. And then that was the only time I saw him until this reissue. But
Yeah.
yeah, that figure ended up being super collectible. I probably could have resold him for $60 or something like that if I did such a thing. But so I figure again with superpowers, that was such a formative series for me as a kid. That's what really introduced me to superheroes, those toys and the little comics that came with them.
I think to a lot of kids.
Say again?
I think to a lot of kids, that's what that was. I mean, if you weren't reading comics, you were watching. Where's I have it here? The superpowers. Booyah!
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
you were watching that.
Yep.
But I mean, really, if you weren't reading that was it. Like that was your introduction, or you watched the Hulk or Wonder Woman or Batman.
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm getting those McFarlane toys, the Superpowers toys, the Masters Origins, of course, as I mentioned, and these new Turtles of Grayskull figures that are coming out. So
That's right. Those things are out now too. Yeah.
yeah.
What do you think about these mashups that they're doing? Because that's interesting. I think they did a Stranger Thing one, and now they're doing the Turtle ones. So
I'm selective. The Stranger Things set is cool, but I'm not necessarily snatching that up. Um, the Turtles of Grayskull line is pretty incredible. I actually have the He-Man right here. So this is like He-Man affected by the Turtles ooze.
okay,
I think the premise of the crossover is that Shredder and Krang team up with Skeletor, and Skeletor uses the mutagen, the ooze, to give his own minions some powers, and then to manipulate some of the good guys like He-Man and Ram-Man. So there's this kind of story they're establishing as the figures are being released, thanks in large part to the mini comics that are coming with them. But at the end of the day,
they do come. I didn't even realize they were coming with mini comics. That's interesting.
oh yeah, yeah, and in fact, Dark Horse is gonna release the Turtles of Grayskull series soon, like a standard-sized monthly comic that
Nice.
kind of continues where these mini comics are leaving off. So I love it. I mean, on my Mount Rushmore of franchises that are most important to me, Masters of the Universe and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are definitely two of those heads on that Rushmore. So see them matched up like this in my lifetime is pretty incredible. My only criticism of the figures, and I've mentioned this on my own YouTube series where I open toys called Just Open It. It's a little plug there on my YouTube channel, Karaoke Fanboy TV. But the only thing that's lacking a little bit with these figures is those Playmates sculpts, if you remember, were really zany, crazy sculpts. Like when you look at the fine details of characters like Muckman or Scumbag, those really bizarre mutant characters, they put a lot of sculpting and detail into that stuff. And I've learned recently that's in large part thanks to Varner Studios. That's the studio that Playmates use to design the toys. And they have a pretty active Instagram, Varner Studios, and they've been posting kind of nostalgic sketches of those designs. Yeah, so that's really cool. They put out a book even of some of it, and it's really awesome. So Mattel is doing this series, the Turtles of Grayskull, and Mattel is just kind of notorious for parts reuse and being comparatively conservative with their sculpts. you have a character like this with He-Man, and he's been affected with ooze, and you could see in the paint application there's some neon green veins going on here.
Yeah.
I feel like if this were a Playmates figure, there would actually be some like clumpy ooze dripping from his muscly frame. So those little things, I kind of just look at it like we could have, as much as these are pushing the envelope, they could have gone a little further, but it's a very minor criticism considering, again, this is a mashup of two of my all-time favorite rosters of characters.
Yeah, and again, I think it's obviously kids love this stuff, but these companies know that we're the ones that are out buying this. And I just saw something. Obviously, you're a Masters collector. There's like I guess they're now doing another like collector's version of He-Man figures. I guess they just recently announced it, and they're like, oh, and then I read all the bashing. It's like, oh, great, I would have not gotten this one because now because this Skeletor has a different head.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to knock Mattel, but like, I think all the companies do it, but they just knowing that we all have our wallets in this, they just
Yeah.
keep registering. Oh, this is the new collector's edition of Thundercats, of Masters, of Star Wars, of Legends, and again, the kids are not buying Thundercats. The kids are probably maybe the Ninja Turtle He-Man ones, but like the He-Man classics, the kids aren't buying that. Like did you get the collector yet, or is that on your wish list of items to get the Skeletor ship? Yeah, Skeletor ship from the cartoon.
Oh no, I'm not doing the cartoon collection. I'm sticking exclusively with the Origins figures because they're closest to the action figure line that I was a fan of as a kid.
Gotcha. So, because that's like who's kids don't know what the collector is, so that's why I bring that up, is because
I barely knew,
well,
and I'm a huge fan of this stuff.
Well, but yeah, maybe it looks cool, but and I even think like the GI Joes, GI Joe just doesn't have the presence that it used to have, but the adults are buying them.
That's true. I mean, I would imagine if kids are still buying action figures, they're looking at Marvel, they're looking at Star Wars, and they're probably looking at some manga and anime properties that you and I aren't as familiar with. But that stuff's just kind of hot with kids. So, if some of these toy companies were making action figures representing those franchises and stories, I think they'd fly off the shelves, and kids would be into action figure as much as we are.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, because I was already thinking that's where I wanted to go with you, as somebody who does a lot of conventions, right? You do a lot, I do a lot, right? So you touch on this thing, the anime, manga, and I'll throw video game world into it. So we know that the fandom that we embrace, and fandoms in general, it's a roller coaster ride.
Right.
I've noticed, at least here in on the East Coast, and maybe you've seen it. And again, not all shows, like a show like Terrificon, maybe not as much, because that's a very much comic centric show. But a lot of the shows, they really are gaming and like anime, manga related now. Are you guys noticing that out where you are?
Oh, absolutely. Going to a show like Terrificon, which is so comic centric, it really shed light. I mean, I already knew that there were large factions of fandom at shows like our local show, Phoenix Fan Fusion. That's the big local show. There's Tucson Comic Con as well, south of us, that has a great convention every year. They just had it. Roy Thomas was a guest there. Cliff from Cheers was also a guest there. But
meet him?
I didn't go to that show this year, but Cliff would have been a draw for me. But what's his name? John Ratzenberger, right?
Yeah,
that's his name. Yeah. But yeah, going to a show like Terrificon and seeing how creators I love, like Walt Simonson, Howard Chaykin, Chris Claremont, Eric Larson, were held in such esteem there, like truly treated like and presented as A-list caliber guests, alongside the movie and TV stars and stuff like that. It really shed light on how that stuff is downplayed in other larger shows, probably to get a more mainstream crowd in.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, let's face it, the comic book fandom, as you said, it's a small community. You and I see each other at a show. It's like, oh my God, I met you over there and now I'm seeing you here. And it's a really pleasant surprise. If these shows only catered to us, I don't think it would be financially viable considering the venues that they book. And so you kind of have to have Sergeant Slaughter show up. You have to have a Chips reunion, if you're a show like Terrificon. And then if you're like an LA Comic Con or here at Phoenix Fan Fusion, you got to bring in, your William Shatners and you know what I mean? That kind of big public draw. So it's viable. It's big. It's as celebratory as we all want it to be. And just the unfortunate consequence of that is comics do take a back seat despite being the driving force behind so many of these things.
Yeah, and it's funny, like you're talking about celebrities. So I was at a show, and I will say that there was an actor from a very popular '90s superhero cartoon that was at a show, and the line for that actor was very, very light, right? But
Yeah.
next to that actor was a voice actor for an anime, and the line was bananas.
Yeah.
For that. So it's interesting because thinking back to, again, legendary shows, and to you and I, we're like, wow, we grew up on this. This is like the the best is the standard of shows. You already know what show I'm referring to, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that there was not a draw because, like you're saying, they're bringing in different people. But I think the Comic-Con clientele, and I think they're more pop culture fests, if anything, now, is the younger crowd is embracing this. Like, because again, we were growing up, it was like living in the shadows, like Gollum with the ring with our precious. Nobody cared about comic books and superheroes, but now it's gone so mainstream. And I even talked with my wife about this. She's an anime fan, and anime in particular is just so hot right now. I think the younger generation, whereas like we were all about Batman and gargoyles and all that stuff and Ninja Turtles and stuff, like for today's youth, that's really where it is like, oh, was it Bleach or Dragon, what's it, Dragon Slayer? I think is it Dragon, right?
Well, Dragon Ball Z and then Demon Slayer.
Demon Slayer, that's it. Demon,
Yeah.
and like you see it with the cosplayers, right? Like the majority of your cosplayers are all probably video game or anime related now. And I think from the comic book collector standpoint, that almost takes a hit unless you're at a show or Terrificon where these guys are top tier people. But having a regular comic book artist, unless like you're Jim Lee or somebody, that takes a hit. And I think even for the vendors, that takes a hit too, because when we were teenagers, it was great to dig through those boxes of comic books, right?
Oh,
but you go,
still is.
well, correct, right? And but you go to any show now, and there might be like a teenager digging through a box with his dad helping him find it, but the people digging through all the comic book boxes at the shows are like our age and older.
Yeah, you are right about that. You are right about that.
And I mean, and you see this at a comic show. You're seeing like your chibis and your anime and like the people selling Pocky and all that stuff like that. Those aren't the comic shows of our youth. So it's interesting to see the evolution. And I think that's kind of where it is now. I mean, listen, I believe that the comic book market is going to once again hit, but it comes up and down. Like during COVID, like everybody was the comic book and sport card market just boomed.
Like absolutely. Yeah, the collectibles market in general. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, now if you were looking to sell your comics at that time, you were getting top dollar for your comics. Now it's now more of a buyer's market. I mean, a buyer's market, because you're going to get the best deal on some of those comic books. But again,
Yeah.
I think it's the quality of the movies and the shows. But I think just the youth really and with everything just drives it, And like you said,
Yeah.
going back to the Target thing was on that same toy aisle where we got like Spider-Man and Iron Man and stuff. Right across from there is all that anime stuff. I mean, growing up, we wouldn't go into a Toys R Us or a Walmart and find all this anime stuff. And you see how mainstream it is now because it's in Walmart, it's in Target, it's in FYE, it's everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll tell you what that does for me as an exhibitor at these shows is it shifts my focus less from sales and more toward marketing.
Yeah.
I think something that's gotten lost in the Comic-Con vibe is it's still an industry show in
Yeah.
that, here in Phoenix, we have home and garden shows, we have RV shows. I know these things take place across the country and stuff. When people go to any other kind of convention, not a Comic-Con, but literally any other kind of convention, car show, whatever it may be, that's not necessarily a marketplace that they're going to. It's more of an exhibition or an expo.
Yeah.
And you walk in and you look at the latest models of things. And as a consumer and an attendee, you're making notes and considering what you're going to buy in the future. Like, I don't know how many people are going to an RV show and rolling off the lot with a new RV, but you're looking at models and you're determining what, if you buy an RV sometime in the future, you're really going to want. The home and garden show, the bridal show,
Yeah.
all the same thing, where you're just looking at product and kind of accumulating your own personal Rolodex or catalog of things that you're going to revisit in the future and buy. And you walk out of those shows usually with like swag bags of t-shirts and notepads and little stress balls and pens
Yeah.
and all this sublimated marketing stuff, promotional materials. So, these businesses are reminding you to visit their website, go to their Instagram, use this coupon, get that deal, and buy our stuff in the future. And Comic-Con doesn't really have that vibe. It's very much more of a, as an exhibitor, I'm selling this to you right now. So because cosplay and stuff has kind of consumed the culture of Comic-Con,
Yeah.
I still sell comics, of course. I do sketches and commissions and stuff, but I'm prioritizing equally the idea that I'm going to give something to somebody and maybe they'll find me online later. Maybe they'll follow me on Instagram and pick up my books at on a future date. And that's just as valuable, that kind of exposure. Here in Phoenix, as well known as my books may be locally, I'll still find better opportunities to get in front of as many people as I will as at that show. Phoenix Fan Fusion will expose me to tens of thousands of people every year, many of which do not go to a local comic book store every Wednesday, probably have little idea that Batman still comes out multiple times monthly, that tomorrow is Batman Day and all this stuff. So, I don't want to take that for granted. I don't want to find myself discouraged by comics taking a back seat. Instead, I want to look at this more. I look at the shows more now as like an expo, like I said, an opportunity to market, distribute some free materials, do sketches, make a name for myself, even still, and build a fan base, grassroots that way, even in the shadow of, in the shadow of Sensei Kreese from Cobra Kai, or whoever the celebrity du jour is at the show.
Well, and you mentioned that, like, you're building a fan base because there, and again, listen, it's a bit there's definitely the business aspect of it, but it really is like a competition. It's almost like walking in like the old days of Sears, and like you're bombarded because who's going to be the first guy to sell you a refrigerator, right? Or a cleaner. Because everybody, you walk down some artist alleys, and everybody's like, "Here, let me show you my book and stuff," And like you said, you'd rather them find you later on because people only have a limited amount of money, and like you said, they're going to see Kreese. That's going to cost them $50, which again, great because that's bringing people into the convention. But from the exhibitor's standpoint, well, then how much money do these people have left to spend on us? So like you said,
Exactly.
when they have those bucks, then they can throw you some money then at that point.
Yeah, that's the ongoing conversation about Comic-Con. Here in Phoenix, I know there are parking garages around the convention center that charge up to $60 to park.
which is crazy.
So $60 to park, let's say a $40 ticket, 1-day ticket. You want to grab a bite to eat while you're in there, which a lot of people seem to do as soon as they walk into the convention. I've noticed, like, a lot of attendees and even some exhibitors I see at their tables, like within the first hour, you're eating. And it's like, you could have grabbed a bite before the show, maybe saved yourself a couple bucks too. But if you put all of those expenses together, you're in $150 before
Yeah.
you've even $150 before you've even purchased a book or a toy or whatever you're there to do. So, yeah, again, looking at it more as an exhibition or an expo to me, um, brings a value back to the experience as an exhibitor. If I'm in Artist's Alley, if I paid for a table, I'm in a couple $100 myself, obviously. So to get a return on that investment means to look at it beyond the potential for profit and more, again, as a marketing venture, like any other business would do at any other kind of convention.
Yeah, I mean, listen, and we've all been to the conventions where they're looking to fill spots, and the guy's there selling his gutters or his window plans.
Oh my God. It's funny you say that because at this last Fan Fusion, I was walking around, somebody watching my table, and a guy said, "Hey, do you have any chips in your windshield?" And I thought he was pitching me a comic book story. This is how naive I was in that moment. Maybe I was just in the zone of shopping for comics. And I said, "Yeah, I got a couple chips in my windshield." And he goes, "Who's your insurance?" And I told him my insurance. And then I'm into the windshield replacement pitch. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not at the state fair. I'm at Comic-Con. What is going on? So yeah, you got to fill that real. And I'll say that that happened on a day where a fellow local cartoonist told me that she could not get a table that year because they were sold out. I thought, man, as much as you're getting this exposure to all of the, you're getting this exposure to the local scene at any show in any city, that's still not comprehensive. There are still so many cartoonists, artists that just don't make it in for whatever reason because of stuff like that, in part. So, yeah, it's kind of this ongoing. And that's why I encourage my friends to not put all of their stock in Comic-Cons, to find other ways to get their books out there, whether it's signings at local shops. Here in Phoenix, we have a First Friday art walk where part of downtown is blocked off, and it's kind of this virtual outdoor art show. Finding unconventional ways to get the work out there as much as the cons in the comic shops. To me, it's just as valuable.
Yeah, well, and that, like you said, you can't put all, and this goes for the artists, this goes for the vendors. Like, yeah, it's an investment if you're putting everything into that, because hundreds of dollars into it. And again, that goes part of what we said. He's like, you see the if you go to and I'm sure in Arizona, if you go to a lot of the conventions, you know all the vendors, you know all the local artists because they're at every show.
True.
And I think, going back to the original days of what San Diego was, but I know when Scott Shaw was one of the guys who one of the founding fathers of San Diego Comic-Con. It was like a once a year kind of big event for all your artists and whatnot, to come together. And the Comic-Con thing is interesting. I thought before the pandemic it was in trouble, but I don't know if it's in trouble again, because literally every weekend there's a convention, and again, depending on where you live, what makes it special to go to a convention if it's happening every week or every other week, and again, depending on your area, if you're seeing the same artists and vendors, which is great, it's fantastic, but what's making it special to go to it?
Yeah, who still wants to meet Lou Ferrigno that hasn't met Lou Ferrigno?
Well, and that's the other point too with the celebrities. Like, we'll just go to that for a minute. Is growing up, like, to Adam, and of course we come from that generation, like seeing William Shatner or Adam West, like, wow, Batman or Captain Kirk, that was a big deal.
Sure.
But now, I mean, obviously Adam's gone, but they're like, given any weekend, you can go online, and I promise you, William Shatner is going to be someplace or two places this weekend. And there, if you want to
Yeah.
meet William Shatner, there's going to be an opportunity. So it kind of loses that special flavor. It takes away from it.
Yeah, which is again, as a cartoonist, feeling like I'm in the minority at a Comic-Con.
Yeah.
I just try to make the experience at my table as unique as possible. I offer free sketches for kids mostly, but anybody that wants one. My comics are so local that here in the Valley, I really exploit that. If I'm doing something here in Phoenix, I really talk about how local my comics are, and just try to create an experience, however brief, that's memorable. So if they find me later, see me later, they're like, "Hey, didn't we see you at the?" I'm always wearing my logo for the brand recognition, and treating it kind of like work in a way where I'm clocking in, I'm on. There's this myth that Todd McFarlane doesn't eat or go to the bathroom at shows. He's just at his table 8 hours signing for fans. I'm not that nuts about it, but I definitely take it as seriously where, if I want to treat this cartooning like a career, when I go to a Comic-Con, I'm at work. So when I'm attending a show as a fan, as I did San Diego this past summer, and I see folks in the small press section within the first hour of the show eating their lunch, I'm like, man, everybody's just come in. We're all raring to go. I want to spend some money. I want to see your books and read your. And the fact that you're talking to me with a mouthful is just, frankly, unprofessional.
Yeah.
So, I keep that mentality that if I'm going to eat lunch, I pull back from the table. Somebody else covers, or maybe I'm not even at my table. I try to stay on my feet as long as possible. When a lot of people are there to take pictures with cosplayers, and that's your competition, you've got to be a character yourself. You have to be a presence yourself. So that's a very conscious strategy on my part.
Well, and again, that's another big thing too. I guess you're only as good as your show, right? Because there is all this competition. I mean, we've all been to multiple shows, and this could be artists, this could be vendors, right? So you walk up and down Artist Alley, and you see people.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Those are $5. Those are $3. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How are you engaging your customer?
You know what? If your work speaks for itself, that's awesome. But I have just enough insecurity.
No, if you're Jim Lee or when Neil Adams was with us, if you're at Neil Adams, that's fine. You want to be on your phone, fantastic, because your work speaks for itself. but for the rest of the people who are like the independent artists, you need to engage, make a product like you said, you word of mouth, and to the Valley down there, and I mean when you're doing the thing at Drawn to Comics, the 24-hour challenge, like you're promoting yourself. You're not getting paid to do that 24-hour challenge, but
right.
You're getting paid in that promotion, which I think is something that a lot of people, if you want to be in this business, like you have to put the work in. And I mean, going back to our youth of today, and I talk with the kids that I work with about this, we're in this world of like just instant gratification. Oh, I'm going to be a famous YouTuber and I'm going to do this. I'm going to be, no, but it takes work. What's going to make you stand out more? And like for you, you've got it. You do the 24-hour challenge. That's like your gimmick down in your community. People know you from that, and people will follow you.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. Yeah. And it's strategic to do it during the summer for me because there is an actual 24-hour comics day that I think is in October, but I decided to do it in the summer so I could promote it at Phoenix Fan Fusion, which is every May or early June here in Phoenix. So I have flyers and I promote that I'm doing this 24-hour comic challenge. I promote it at the show in May, and I usually do it in June or July. This year I did it a little later in August, but to do it in the summertime is strategic so I could promote it there. And then also, as you can imagine, because of the heat and stuff, there's not a lot of things happening here in Phoenix at that time. So I could kind of get a weekend to myself where, again, if I issue a press release, it might be a slow news weekend. They're looking for something to talk about. So why not kind of feed into that vacuum a little bit and see if I can get some heat on myself as a result of that. So yeah, cartoonists that are looking for opportunities like that, develop a strategy and kind of create a narrative for yourself where now I know my fans know every year I'll be at Fan Fusion. I'll be talking about the 24-hour challenge. Usually that precedes the Jack Kirby birthday celebration I throw here every year too in late August. So during the 24-hour challenge, I'll promote that. And then, so it's just one thing kind of leads into another. And I've created some traditions that fuel the sale of my books and the perpetuation of my brand as a cartoonist. So it takes thought, but it works.
And you have the partnership with the comic shop too, drawing the comics and what they do.
Absolutely.
There. So and listen, as good as the promotion is for you, it's fantastic promotion for them as well. You know,
definitely.
Source. So it's that synergy moment. So.
Yeah, and we get Kids Need to Read involved too. Like I said, the nonprofit, the fact that they're so literacy driven, and I look at comics truly as like a storytelling medium. There's a synergy there too. And I want to say, I want to play off of something you said about kids with the instant gratification and stuff, because a phenomenon I'm seeing now, and tell me what you think about this, in comics making and in cartooning is, and it's just an interesting thing where sketch cards, sketch covers, pinups, simply just drawings. It's easy to draw something, post it on Instagram, and especially fan art, and get those immediate likes and follows and that dopamine of like, okay, everybody loves my style. And especially if I'm drawing Batman close to Batman Day, or if, you know, Deadpool Wolverine's coming out, I'm going to do a Wolverine pinup or something like that. And so you do, you know, you sit down to the drawing board, you spend 2-3 hours, you draw this amazing picture of Wolverine and you post it, and suddenly you think you're making comics. And to me, comics is storytelling. So, you know, if you're at the drawing board for those 2-3 hours and you're designing and drawing a page that, and this is just me, I don't necessarily want to post all of my behind the scenes stuff for a few different reasons, but, you know, so I don't get that instant gratification that somebody else might. It's delayed satisfaction because then the book comes out and I get to celebrate the book. I find that to be an interesting phenomenon where, as much as we were talking about digital art taking away from the idea of the original art market, I see this thing with people drawing pictures, for lack of a better term, calling them comics, taking away from a potential future of original characters and stories. Have you thought about that at all, or what are your thoughts about stuff like that?
As you're talking about that, you know where my brain went right to? AI.
Oh, of course.
That's a whole other world, right? And you know, is that art? Sure, ish. Not really. I don't know.
Yeah, but I'll tell you that the phenomenon I'm describing, I think, established the market for AI.
Probably
Because in a lot of ways, selling prints at shows of
pirates. That's where
selling you know, Batman, Deadpool, Harley Quinn prints, and creating this market at Comic-Con where instead of buying books, I'm buying pictures. And I'm not saying these pictures aren't beautifully drawn, well crafted, that they aren't, you know, amazing works of art in and of themselves, but the fact that that's become such an important part of the con scene and the consumer's experience in buying things at a show that represent the stuff they love. I think that just created this market where now, why buy a print at a show when I could just tell AI to make that print for me?
Correct.
And before you know it, we're not even reading comics anymore. We're just churning out images. And I don't even know what that's called. You know, I don't call it comics, because comics to me is storytelling. So with graphic design. So I don't know. That's just where my thoughts have been lately on cons and AI art and all that stuff and the trends I see online.
But again, that goes into that whole mark, like, you know, you as an artist, that's part of your competition. And again, listen, there are people who do amazing artwork, but then, like, we all see them, that there's sometimes a show you go to and there's a vendor there and they're selling artwork, but Did they make that already? Right? I mean, like you said, could I go online and say, I don't know, pick two random things. I'm just like looking around here, I'm just looking at one of my like, hey, you know what? I want to do a print of the Munsters meet Scooby Doo. Right?
Oh wow.
It doesn't exist. Warner Brothers, Universal, first of all, two different companies, right? But that those properties have never mixed. Probably will never mix, right? But maybe AI made this beautiful Herman Munster and Scooby Doo print for me,
Sure.
and will it sell? Very likely. Somebody will be like, "Oh, that's freaking awesome! I need to buy that."
Yeah.
But again, who made it? And then
Right.
so you and all the other people who are like, the independent artists who have all original art, and you're doing sketches and stuff, you're competing with, like you said, a computer generated image, or just this one. And again, I would appreciate even more if it was like, if you drew Herman Munster and Scooby Doo and said this was just a cool idea I had, and
Sure.
as opposed to somebody, and because next to the Scooby Doo and Herman Munster's like, yeah, I'm Harley Quinn, and I don't know, a female character, Harley Quinn and Psylocke in like an embrace or something,
Right.
stuff you'll never see, but you've seen all those things at the cons, and that also, I think, hurts the independent artists too.
Yeah, and I just take that as a challenge to assert the importance of comics as storytelling with original characters, even more so. And I encourage so many of my super talented peers here in the Valley that they draw so well, and it's like, well, what's the what book are you working on right now? I've organized Drink and Draw locally, where I really prioritize bring your pages and let's sit down, and we're really not just drawing, as fun as that is, and I'm not taking anything away from that, but the emphasis on developing a page and telling a story and presenting characters that your readers could fall in love with. That's what we say again.
The real creativity.
Yeah, and that's why we're into all of this stuff. I mean, as kids, we read comics. It was way more than the art; it was the story too. So, putting credence in both, putting significance in both, to me, fuels the industry and promises its future. If we're just looking at pictures, then unfortunately, that may be all we're left with when it's over, and future generations won't have a Dark Knight Returns or a Watchmen or anything of that caliber. Not to sound all doom and gloom, but again, these are just things I'm thinking about going into the future and looking at AI, like you said, and social media and stuff. And as a guy that still draws on paper, where is my viability in that context?
And you mentioned the big thing. Story is so key. Like, I mean, I'm gonna say guilty as charged. Because we can't buy all these things because it's expensive, right? So I have like the Marvel Unlimited app. So I can go back and I can read like the original, like Werewolf by Night or some of those old things.
Awesome.
Awesome. But such story driven, because I mean, listen, and this goes for any of the companies, DC, Archie, Charlton Comics, Marvel, so like some of these legendary characters and even some of these fantastic stories, the art sucks on some of these. Like, because again, and I'm not knocking people, but like in today's standards, like, and of course, like, you look, some of these people were the masters, and again, everybody has their different styles, but by today's standards, some of these things like from the 60s and 70s just would not pass now. But the things that drove what we were reading was absolutely the story.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
And that was the key to it. And I think finding that element back into this, instead of just producing this beautiful art, that's a huge part of it. But you need to have that foundation of a good story as well. And as you were mentioning in it too, like Dark Knight Returns, like I can't even think, and I try, I follow comics as best as I can, but I can't even think anything in recent years that has been like a riveting storyline for comics. Like, I mean, listen, we know that there's always, oh, this is the hot book this week. This is a spec book. Buy all the copies because that's going to be, because this character is picking their nose in the background. They're going to be in the next flick. That's what everybody buys that book. But there hasn't been like any, at least in my opinion, there hasn't been anything that's been like a riveting story that's going to last for decades, like some of these other, like the Infinity War or Dark Knight Returns. Like, there's nothing that's been around recently like that. I don't know. Have you seen anything like that stands out to you?
I would conjecture maybe Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ronin might
Well, yeah,
have that kind of impact,
that's one. Yes, Ronin is a pretty big one. I'd love to see
which
a
is
live of that.
arguably a Dark Knight Returns derivative. It's just kind of taking that formula of the dystopian future, the lone survivor kind of concept, and or the lone hero, I should say, and putting it in the Ninja Turtles world. But I've seen that book at Target. That's kind of broken beyond the bounds of the comic book shop, and that's out there in the mainstream marketplace. So time will tell. I think that might be one that sticks around for a little while.
Yeah, but again, there's not that many.
No, not really.
I would love to see a Ronin flick. That'd be great.
Oh my gosh, there's an awesome fan animation online on YouTube if you haven't seen it. That really whets your appetite for it. This would be a super cool movie.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I believe, aren't they potentially turning that into a film?
They should be if they aren't, because again, it's got that mainstream appeal.
I heard that there was a live action one, because it's funny. I did a Comic-Con here, and they did a Ninja Turtles reunion. So you had both Aprils were there, and
oh wow,
well, it was great. But Judith, and one of the questions that came up to her, and I've read rumblings online. Somebody said to Judith, they said you would make the perfect April for that incarnation of Ninja Turtles. So that would be great. I mean, it could be like a pseudo sequel to what they did already back in the day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Picking up where Turtles in Time left off.
I mean, well, because technically TMNT was a sequel, like a fourth film in that series with very loose.
Right.
Film. But I kind of, I rewatched all those with my son this summer. He'd never seen them before, because we were going to this convention, and so I said, we're gonna watch these, and he actually for whatever reason he loved Turtles in Time.
Well,
like, really?
He's kind of the demographic for it,
I guess. I mean, I look back at it. I loved the second one when I was a kid.
Me too, of course.
But that really was the cartoon. That's what that was. It was the cartoon. Yeah. But I mean, like, if they wanted to take a page out of like some other like reboots that they're doing now, like Halloween's or Exorcist and stuff like that, avoid the sequels, right? And if they did Ronin as a straight sequel to the first Ninja Turtle movie, that'd be pretty solid.
Incredible.
That was a dark flick.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. When we talk about those franchises like the Turtles films, the original Turtles films, and we were talking before we came on live about Batman and Robin. So you look at the kind of Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher universe. It's interesting that as those films like unfolded and we got sequels, we, the core audience, got older as they decided to skew significantly younger with that stuff. So I look at Turtles in Time as kind of the equivalent of Schumacher's Batman and Robin as far as where those movie sequels ended up. And it's just interesting that they thought keep going younger as we were getting older. And so I'm excited to hear that your son dug it and that he was into the Batman and Robin McFarlane figures too. I mean, but he's exactly where they wanted us to be in 1997.
He's 11. That's the thing. And on that same note, right? A buddy of mine had this conversation. This was a few years ago. Love or hate the movie Solo, right? I loved Solo. I thought Solo was great, and everybody, I can't think of the guy's name who played the actor who played Han Solo in this. I mean, Donald Glover was fantastic as Lando, but everybody was tearing, oh, well, this isn't Han Solo. But you went in there with any kids, and kids dug it. They loved it because you know what? To this generation, that's Han Solo. Yes, will there always be Harrison Ford? Of course. But that movie was again marketed to a younger audience. I don't want to say younger audience, but just like for us, they marketed to kids and stuff too, families, and yes, they want to make all of us fanboys happy too. But they also want they want to honor, like, the kids are here, like, enjoy it.
Well, right. You got to pass the baton and you got to stay fresh. And that's what keeps characters like Batman, well, mentioned because tomorrow's Batman Day.
Yeah.
Batman's 85 years old or something like that. And yet everyone knows who Batman is. Kids, whether or not they're actually actively buying comics, still would say they love Batman, I think.
Yeah.
So you just have to refresh, constantly refresh. And I think one of the reasons why we see so many reboots, just in the past couple decades, is because the attention span thing, as it gets shorter, you have to kind of reignite the franchise with something. That's why in our lifetime we went from will there ever be a live action Spider-Man movie to 3 actors that have played Spider-Man just in the last 15, 20 years or so. And that's just because kids are coming in and they, Andrew Garfield is one generation's Spider-Man. And then to follow that, now Toby is another generation's Spider-Man. So I think the films in that way keep the characters fresh. When the comics do it, it kind of pales in comparison, like this absolute Batman, absolute Superman stuff that DC's about to put out.
Yeah.
I'm approaching that with some reservation, but we'll see what it's like.
They've remember what I remember they did the Superman book years ago. Gosh, was it the new? It wasn't the new 52, was it? No, was it the new 52 that got like all the backlash with Superman?
Maybe. I mean, they did the new 52. They did All-Star Superman, which was Frank Miller, John Romita Jr. There was Superman Year One, which came out as kind of a ultimate universe from the DC kind of idea. So they're always trying to present this let's start from scratch concept. And I don't know if that brings in as many new readers. My mentality is to focus less on the content of the book and more on the context of the book. In other words, like, I don't know how many kids want to carry around a floppy comic book, 22, 30-page comic book nowadays. But they seem to have no problem carrying around these manga-sized digests, right? So to release comics, and DC is doing this now, they're putting out these digest-sized books. I think that's a really smart move because kids are kind of into that durability, the portability, taking it with you, having it in your backpack or something, and you could bust it out and read it, and it's not precious. Like with a floppy comic, you got to bag and board it immediately because if one of those corners gets, it loses all of its value.
The fun of collecting is, I mean, it's not even fun of collecting. See, like you say that, geez.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah, I brought home Raphael Grampa's Batman book, the first issue. I can't think of the name of it. I think Gargoyles of Gotham or something like that. And that was one of those books that when you bought it off the shelf in real time that day it came out, you knew that it was going to have some value in the near future. Like that book was just going to, he's a hot artist. Everybody loves him. You knew that book was going to find something.
Yeah.
I brought it home. I read it. I put it down. When I picked it up, I put it down in something sticky on a table. So the back of the cover kind of tore a little bit. And I was like, well, this book's worth nothing now, other than the amazing story that was inside, which I really enjoyed, and the artwork and stuff. So again, kind of presenting books in more of a, not disposable, but just kind of the idea that this is a, when you look at novels on the shelf, and you see how well, you can see how well read a novel is by how damaged that spine is.
Correct.
And with comics, we're way more precious with them. So to me, to have a volume like that, where you could ding it, you could bang it up, you can carry it around with you, you can read it over and over again. Yeah. That's where the value is to me. Yeah. So,
and it's funny that you mentioned that though too. And again, as a toy collector, a fellow toy collector, this is the same situation. You mentioned that comic book, right?
Oh, so, yeah.
Everybody bought it. I mean, I didn't buy one, but everybody bought it. They bagged and boarded it, right? So 30 years from now, like how we're all about our 90s comic books and stuff now. So 30 years from now, how many 9.6s, 9.8s of this book are going to exist? And how much, and really, how much is, right now, sure, how much is that book going to be worth in like 30 years?
Right.
And that's the things, because and I think I said this before. It's the same thing. Like, oh, this is the hot book right now. Look at everybody who invested in the first appearance of Dazzler because they thought Taylor Swift was going to be in Deadpool movie, right? And all those people feel like suckers now. And
it can still happen.
Well, but not the movie that was out. So no, I mean, it's been a long time. So regarding spoiler alerts here, hold, just give me 1 second. I just got to plug.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I don't know if it's a spoiler if we're saying that it didn't happen in the movie. That's kind of a weird anti-spoiler.
But it's been about 2 months.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think fair to say we can talk about that now, right?
Yep. Well, when you talk about the bagging and boarding of comics too, and then as toy collectors, Funko Pops are so bizarre in that.
God, hold on 1 second. I just gotta get a wire for my computer. Hold on.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Entertain everybody now.
Yeah, I'll just let everybody know that you could find my comic, Amazing Arizona Comics, on my Instagram at AmazingAZ Comics, or at my website, AmazingArizonaComics.com. But Instagram's really where it's at. That's what I update the most often. And my latest issue, number 51, answers the question, can superpowers solve the homeless crisis? I'll give you a spoiler alert here. The answer is no. But how would a superhero tackle the issue of homelessness in his city? That's what's going on in that latest issue. So I was just giving the plug for my latest issue while you were getting your technical stuff in order there.
Yeah, my computer was about to die here, so I just needed to get the charger. And
yeah, no problem, man.
I think one of my wires is a little frayed, unfortunately, so I needed to get a different charger. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, folks. But yeah, going back to the collectability of things. There we go. Now I got some juice. But yeah, that's the thing. And so even with the toys, right? Everybody buys all these toys, and where's it going, right? Because I mean, you have that wall of toys behind you. I've got like my Muppet figurines here and stuff like that, and I know those ones are worth a little bit, but like the Star Wars stuff, the Marvel Legends, even like the McFarlane stuff we were talking about before we came on. How many people are going to have sealed figures of these things 20, 30 years from now, and how much is worth? I mean, I think perfect example is look at the episode 1 toys, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you went to Midnight Madness like everybody else.
I did at KB Toys.
I did KB Toys and Toys R Us. And everybody was, oh God, I gotta have Jar Jar Binks. I need to have. So I got like 6 of him in my cart. I mean, I didn't have 6 of him. And little Anakin. This is Darth Vader's. And now they're like, you go to a Comic-Con. Those are like in the $3 to $5 bin.
Absolutely. Yeah. I lived in Southern California at the time, and I remember going to that midnight. And I'm not a big Star Wars guy, to be fair. As far as buying toys and stuff, especially, that's just I'm not Richie Rich over here. I couldn't afford it. But I went to that Midnight Madness sale, and 2 heads in front of me, I was looking long and hard, like, where do I know this guy from? And it was Rob Liefeld in Orange County in line for those Star Wars toys. So that just goes to show how that fever kind of gripped us all. Yeah, and everybody jumped on board for it. But again, so I think like the toys, the comics now, and I mean, perfectly goes with what the name of your little podcast is with the toys. Just open it. Just open it. These things are works of art in and of themselves. They are designed, sculpted, painted, and yeah, it's on an assembly line for the most part when you get to this stage of the figure, but it does come from somebody's imagination. And I just very much believe in opening it, enjoying it, posing it, putting it on your shelf. And even though some of these things are just collecting dust back there, it's an aesthetic not unlike somebody that might have a sports memorabilia collection or a bunch of framed prints from a Comic-Con. This is just kind of my incarnation of that, where I look at it as representations of characters and stories that I love. So the Funko Pops, it's crazy that like it's not enough to keep the Funkos in the box, but now they buy the sleeves for the box. Yeah. So you're putting the box in a clear box. And that to me is crazy. But you could buy a Funko protective sleeve at Target right alongside the Funkos. So it kind of encourages and enables this. This might be worth something someday. Keep it safe,
Yeah, and
Very weird. Very weird.
and they're so mass produced. That's the thing. So, and I mean, listen, I think the majority of people who buy Funko Pops, I mean, I have a handful. I by all means, I'd say if I have 20 tops, that's about it. But I mean,
Same.
they're
Yeah.
and again, but they're ones that mean something to me. But there are people who like, uh, I mean, I don't know how much info you get about New York Comic Con out on your side there, but everybody here is posting about New York Comic Con and the Funko booth, and all the VIPs got all the first dibs. I'm getting the tickets to the Funko line, and it's just because. And I've been to New York Comic Con. I'm sure same thing in San Diego. The guys just have the huge shopping bags, and they're cruising through there. And then they go to the booth, and that one that they pay $10 is already $300 at their booth, and it's just and it's just
It takes the fun out of it for me. I mean, I'm not in this for collectability. I'm in it for nostalgia and, kind of a celebration of. I hate to keep saying story, but that's what it all boils down to for me. I love the A Team. I mean,
Yeah.
I loved watching that show, so I have all of the A Team Funko Pops. So that's kind of what I zero in on. I really want to get the Frasier Funko Pops. I don't know how.
There's a Frasier one.
They apparently made Frasier Funko Pops. I haven't seen them in the wild, but I've seen them online.
Or the
And I
new
think they're
show.
real. The old show. So I think Frasier, Niles, and Martin have Funkos. So
And Kelsey Grammer's doing connections now, so he can sign it for you.
I saw that. Kelsey's at Fan X in Salt Lake City, and he's doing the circuit now. So
you have the choice. You want to do Frasier or you want to do Beast, whichever one you like.
Whatever you want. Sideshow Bob too. I mean, he's he's got a few plates spinning in nerddom.
So, well, no one. Listen, there's money to be made for him now. At that point. 100%. But it's just interesting to and people spend all this money. Like, listen, I do some of the HasLab stuff. Like I got the Razor Crest from the Mandalorian. They have the Ghost coming out, and listen, it's a couple $100 for these things, and it's like, why am I spending, a couple $100 on a cool ship? And I have all like the Mandalorian figures, right? But why am I not putting them in the ship? Like. So I spent all this money to have this box. Now, yes, granted, could I leave this for my kids one day? 40 years from now, right? But then what's the point? I might as well just not spend the money and just left the money for them. If I want it, I might as well enjoy it. But that's right. I mean, and that's the thing. And you see, I'm sure you see on Facebook, there's all these people arguing, oh, I can't believe you opened that toy. And even like I've got my old Star Wars figures, and I remember years ago when my son's 11 now, but when he was like 5 years old, I pulled out some of my old Star Wars toys, and he's playing with them. Oh my God, how can you let your who cares? Like
that's what they were made for. I mean, comics were made to be read, toys were made to be played with.
Yeah.
The collectability of these things originally came from how scarce and rare they were. I mean, the fact that comics were recycled for the war effort in World War II is where we kind of get this collectibles market today. And then our generation experienced that with the image boom and the idea that all of these new number ones are flooding the market. What if Spawn number one is one day as valuable as Action Comics number one? So I got to get my hands on that, bag, board it, never look at it again.
What's the retail for now? Maybe like not much, not a lot.
No, not really. And that's because ultimately everybody that wants one probably has one now, right? That's much where the bubble bursts for collectability is. Like you say, with these McFarlane toys in 30 years, are you telling me there's going to be folks that are clamoring for McFarlane toys in the same way you or I might get really excited if we see a Mego? And we're excited when we see that Mego because it was probably played with, or the box was in storage and it's got some character to it, some dings and damage that make it look really cool. Like I like that kind of stuff. So I don't know. The collectability is a fun part of this world that we live in. Like you say, people look at it and wonder, why would you spend $100 on a thing like that? Nobody asks that question to somebody that might have spent a couple $100 on a Super Bowl ticket
Correct.
or, a signed sports jersey or something like that. It's all the same. It's all kind of going back to something that made an impression on you as a kid, and you just kind of ride that into adulthood. And I think the comics world, it's thanks to the movies in part, it's coming around where folks don't look at it as,
yeah, it's mainstream. It's
Yeah.
it's cool to be a nerd. It's cool to be a nerd.
Finally.
we've been vindicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Although I'll say, I never, when I think back about being a kid reading comics and drawing and stuff in class, I don't remember a lot of bullying that came as a result of that. I think that a lot of my friends felt disconnected from it. They didn't quite relate to it.
Yeah.
But we were really at the beginning, the Batman movie in '89, and then Ninja Turtles and all that. People attribute Iron Man in 2008 to making this stuff cool, but I don't know. I feel like we kind of undersell how important some of that foundational stuff was in our generation. There was a period of time where you would have movies like Dick Tracy and The Phantom, and these were Shadow. These were coming out every other weekend, just like Marvel movies and comic book movies do now. So
I need a copy of. I'm thinking I need a copy of Rocketeer. I don't have that in my collection. I need that.
Oh, I got it on VHS right here.
Yeah, that's it. And again, it's the comic world. I mean, and I think for a lot of it too, it's also expanded into that world of animation too. Like growing up, like if you were into it, like I can speak for myself, like I knew who all the different voice actors were. Like, Rob Paulson, Maurice LaMarche, those guys are awesome. And I would tell people like, Pinky and the Brain. Like, and some people would know Pinky and the Brain, but like, but Rob Paulson, he's just a brilliant actor, right? And unless you were in the know of voice acting, and again, this is before the days of the internet and stuff, you just recognize names from cartoons. It's like, all right, cool, But now, I mean, people know who he is, like 30, 40 years later, and he's out there getting the love from, again, our generation. But even like, it's good for those people that they are mainstream now too, and getting the love that they deserve too, because
absolutely.
And the artists, the actors, the people who are behind the scenes who never had the chance, obviously, sadly, like voice actors don't get the same recognition as like, Tom Cruise or William Shatner or whoever. But, now they get that love, which I think is fantastic.
I discovered what voice acting was as a kid watching Inspector Gadget, because I recognized Don Adams' voice from Get Smart reruns.
Yeah.
So I saw Get Smart first, probably on Nick at Night or something. And then one day I tune in and this Inspector Gadget is on. And I thought that was just Get Smart, the animated series, basically, because he had a Q phone and some other gadgets. And 99 wasn't there, but Penny was there. And there was still a chief, a disgruntled chief. So I just looked at that as, Inspector Gadget's Maxwell Smart. And then when I realized these were two different characters, two different worlds and stories, it clicked that, that's an actor just providing the voice for this cartoon. Yeah. And that really developed an appreciation for. And I remember watching Batman, the animated series, I think. Who did Richard Mall voice in Batman? Two-Face?
Two-Face.
Yeah, I remember. I recognized the voice. That's the dude from Night Court, and I put it all together. Yeah, so those guys are kind of the unsung heroes of our childhood that are finally getting some comeuppance now. And like you say, the kids that get in line for these anime voice actors, thanks to the internet, they're as big a celebrity as anybody else, and that's great at a show. I think that's really cool.
I mean, and again, going back to look at Kevin Conroy, right? He is the iconic icon. He was the iconic voice of Batman,
to the point where he got to actually portray him
in
real life.
Was it Bat with the back? It was one of the Crisis episodes. I forget. I think it was the Batgirl episode, Batgirl Supergirl, where he played it in.
Yeah, but, and he quotes some Dark Knight Returns and maybe one or two other comics. They kind of infused that dialogue into the script for him to say. And yeah, how cool is that?
Yeah, cool. And tomorrow being Batman Day, I do want to throw out there too, and I don't know if you know this, the 21st tomorrow and the 25th, at least I know Regal Cinemas, I guess Fathom is where they do the Fathom events, but they're doing a Christopher Reeve documentary. So we're talking about iconic actors.
Oh,
That's tomorrow. I guess theaters tomorrow, limited engagement, and then on the 25th too. So
I knew that was coming out. I'm gonna have to check that out. I didn't know that was coming up so soon. So
yeah, so see it this weekend. See Superman on Batman Day. There you go.
It's 1939 all over again.
Oh gosh. Anyways, we've been at this for almost 2 hours, which is good. But I know there's so much more we need. We could go on for hours and hours, and we should. But before we head off tonight, I want you to just share with everybody where else they can maybe find you. What do you have coming up? And I've obviously on the bottom there we've got check out Amazing Arizona Comics at amazingarizonacomics.blogspot.com. So
you could actually take the blog spot out. I do have the domain for amazingarizonacomics.com. One of the developments of the last 4 years. But that's all good, man.
Comics.com then on that one.
And on Instagram, it's Amazing AZ Comics. I do post often there. I'm finishing the 24-hour comic issue. So during those 24 hours, I wrote, penciled, and inked the pages. I've been coloring and lettering them. It will come out on Saturday, the 28th at Drawn to Comics. So I'm going back to the shop where I made it and having a release party for that issue. It'll be available on my Etsy store, which is linked in my link tree on Instagram. So again, following me at Amazing AZ Comics will kind of take you to everything. But I have a lot of exciting stuff coming up. I'm doing a comic book talk at an ASU authors event soon. So I'm really excited to bring comics to that world where they're going to be talking about poetry and literature. And I host a drink and draw here in the Valley every month at a local coffee shop, SO Coffee House. So any cartoonists that are in the Phoenix area or visiting the Phoenix area, and we happen to be doing that kind of thing, come by, draw with us. It's a blast just to hang out and kind of get a little studio vibe in the coffee shop. And I write a weekly column called My Maker Mantras that's on nerdvana.co. That's Nerdvana with a D. And I write about the lessons I've learned self-publishing for the last 14 years with my comic, and really going back 20 years with my buddy in California. So I've kind of consolidated these lessons I've learned into what I call maker mantras. And again, I post a column there. So a lot of stuff, but Instagram's where I share everything.
And your YouTube page too.
My YouTube, Karaoke Fanboy TV. I've had a little hiatus with my Just Open It videos because I've been working on the comic, but I am approaching episode 100 of
Nice.
Just Open It, which means I've opened almost 100 toys on YouTube, which means you could actually probably calculate the amount of money I've spent in toy purchases over the last few years, and there's tons more here. The Masters Origins figures that have been coming out since 2020, I've maybe only opened like a fourth of what I've purchased. So
my Star Wars, I've got not boxes. I got a pile of like Star Wars figures that I haven't even opened yet, and it's just one day. One day, it's
and that was the catalyst or the inspiration for the Just Open is like, I got to open these toys. Well, if I do it as a YouTube series that comes out weekly, then I have to open one every week at least and get rid of all this unnecessary cardboard and plastic in my house. So.
Now I'll ask you now, because there's some of collectors who like to keep the packages. Keep them, chuck them. What do you do?
I have kept some vintage boards from the original Ninja Turtles line. Toxic Crusaders, I have a board or two, but I have decided to toss them in the interest of space here in my apartment. But also, if you are into it so much that you know the artists that are designing those packages, you could follow those folks on Instagram, and they post that art there. So if I ever want to just look at it, I know where to find those images online. And so I've decided to favor having the toy opened on the shelf and having room for more toys, and not just, again, these stacks of packages or boards that I'd have to store. Yeah, there's just so much room, and ultimately that's just Tinder for when, the fire comes through here and destroys all this stuff, right? So
Well, again, it goes back to the thing. If you're buying these things, you're enjoying these now. Listen, if you're looking to sell them, then maybe you shouldn't open them, right? But if you're buying them to enjoy them, then open them. That's what
absolutely.
it comes down to.
Yeah.
So great. So
Well,
no,
hey man, let's not wait 4 years to do this again. Like you said, we could talk for hours about all this stuff we have in common and love. So always happy to do it.
absolutely. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back soon again, and we'll hang out for a minute after we're off the air. But thank you everybody for tuning in. Follow Amazing Arizona Comics. Go to Drawn to Comics if you're in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and all the
Absolutely.
other shops that are down there. And we'll see you all very, very soon. Thanks again tonight, Russ.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you.